world for our 6th annual seminar for priests in Catholic schools. Seton Hall held out to the bitter end, really, in giving us the opportunity, we thought, to have an on-campus event. And then about 5 weeks ago, it just became clear that it was not going to happen. And I consulted the board of the Catholic Education Foundation if they wanted us to just skip a year or to go virtual. And the unanimous decision of the board was that we should go virtual, not to lose momentum. And it's always nice to be able to say 6th annual, 7th annual, and so on. We wouldn't have been able to say that if we had skipped the year. And so let's hope that this works. I would like to begin with a meditation by Cardinal Newman. And I think it applies to all of us in varying ways. And it seems to me that parents, teachers, and priests all have one thing in common, and it's that we have to be content with either delayed gratification or no gratification at all. It's a rare parent or teacher who gets told, I appreciate the discipline you just gave me, or whatever. And so this is what Cardinal Newman has to say. God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place while not intending it, if I do but keep his commandments. Therefore, I will trust him. Whatever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I am in sickness, my sickness may serve him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve him. He does nothing in vain. He knows what he is about. He may take away my friends. He may throw me among strangers. He may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink, hide my future from me. Still, he knows what he is about. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom, pray for us. St. John Henry, pray for us.
Pray for us.
All right. Well, as I indicated, our normal home for the past 3 years has been Seton Hall. For those of you who have not been there, I regret that you won't have the opportunity. Everyone who has come, priests from all around the country, we now have over 40 dioceses that have sent priests and seminarians to our event. But the first thing that strikes priests when they come to Seton Hall for the first time, they say, it just smells and feels Catholic. And it's just a wonderful feel to the place. The University Chapel is a gem of architecture, and the whole campus. So it's unfortunate that that's not possible. The other parts that become very popular with the priests are the opportunities for social interaction with priests from around the country, networking, and so forth. But we'll do the best that we can. At any rate, we're still putting all of this event under the patronage of Mother Seton as well. And so I've asked Dean Gillette to continue to be part of our process. She has always just been the most gracious hostess every time that we've been at Seton Hall, as well as the tremendous support that we get from the campus ministry program and the School of Theology. So for all of this, we're very, very grateful. And so Dean Gillette, if you want to say a few words of introduction as well.
Sure. I'm thrilled to welcome you. And some of you, of course, are familiar. I've seen you in past years, and it would have been really nice to be in person tonight and to be able to see you throughout the next couple days, not on Zoom. I think all of us are at the point now of kind of craving to be able to be in the company live of other human beings after seeing people on video for so long. I want to thank Kevin for, you know, putting this all together and being sure that we can all at least see each other during this time. It's a very difficult time for Seton Hall right now, and all of you who have a school under your auspices know how difficult it is to have let the children go and now try to bring them back. And that's what we're struggling with right now as the coronavirus keeps going across the country, and we keep waiting to hear, will we be able to bring students back on campus? That is our plan. So hopefully, you know, next year we will be all together again on campus. That's my greatest wish. But Father asked me if there was a video that kind of gave an overview of Seton Hall, and there is, and we'll show you that. I think, yep, there we go.
This is the Seton Hall story, one that comes to life every day on our campus. Our students, who start out as curious about a subject, are challenged to learn as much as possible about it from world-class faculty who want them to succeed. And over time, their passion blossoms into a new world of opportunities. At first, our students work together for an assignment or a grade. But then, they realize their collaboration means much more. At their core, they are moving in the same direction, becoming great minds and servant leaders who will make a positive impact on our ever-changing world. Whether in a lab or on a court, our students are always hungry to learn more, do more, and be more than they ever thought possible. And over time, these thinkers, innovators, and creators gain expertise in their fields and have the opportunity to collaborate with great minds from around the globe. Some will travel the few miles to the business capital of the world, or take a short train ride to our nation's capital, while others will go even farther to pursue their dreams. Each decision that lights their path has great meaning and reflects the values of Seton Hall. The strong connections formed on each of our campuses and the Catholic values we teach inspire our community to take heart and take action. This is what sets Seton Hall apart from other universities. This is a place where great minds discover, innovate, collaborate, and explore the great issues of our day. Yet it is also a place where passion has a purpose, where learning is synonymous with leading, where students are inspired to be their best and to do their best to make the world a better place. This is Seton Hall University. This is what great minds can do.
Thanks. That's a little overview, and I'll just tell you a few words about the College of Education and Human Services. I'm really thrilled this year because my own doctoral student is going to present her research to you on why principals come and why they stay in Catholic schools. Tomorrow I'll have the opportunity to say a few more words about my commitment to Catholic schools, but we do have a Catholic school leadership program. It runs online and in person, most likely mostly online. So if you have teachers who you see leadership potential in, we encourage you to look at our program. And along with that, you know, we prepare teachers, many of whom go into Catholic schools. And we're really doing amazing work during the pandemic. When we went out, all of our student teachers continued on. We have a long-standing partnership with the Archdiocese of Metuchen, which we started this year, and we are providing professional development on problem-based learning for every teacher and administrator in Metuchen. I don't know if, I didn't see Bobby on the program this year, but Superintendent Bobby Lockwood spoke last year to you, so you may remember him. So that has led to an amazing partnership. So we look forward to a great couple days here with you, and if there's anything I can do to help you now or in the future, please feel free to let me know. But welcome to Seton Hall.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Just a couple of other points about Seton Hall. It's the oldest diocesan university in the United States, and it's the second largest diocesan university in the world. The largest is Sacred Heart in Milan by many, many more thousands. But most people don't realize that there's a very small number of diocesan colleges and universities in the country. I think it's about 11 or 12 only, and Seton Hall is the first of those. And the faculty, we still have 47 priests on campus. When I was an undergraduate, there were over 70, but 47 is no mean accomplishment in these days. So there's, again, that wonderful Catholic ethos that's so important. If you are looking to shepherd some of your high school students into a good Catholic university, that's a good place to land them. So I have to also echo Maureen's thanks to Kevin. Kevin does all this stuff behind the scenes. He does it efficiently, and I think he's rivals me with probably sleeping about 2 hours a day, because anytime you call Kevin, he's right there on the spot, ready to help. So he makes the mistake of always reoffering his services, and but we're grateful for it.
Well, Father, just really quickly, I want to thank you for hosting this and still doing this given the pandemic. And just when it comes to any of the priests in the Archdiocese of Detroit or anyone with a collar, I'm just looking to get a few hours or a few days off of purgatory, so I'm always happy to.
Well, if we had been around in 2017, Kevin, I could have sold you an indulgence in honor of the Protestant Reformation. All right, let me give you a little bit of autobiographical information which may help situate my commitment to Catholic schools. I've been from kindergarten through 2 doctorates exclusively in Catholic schools. And my own story, though, starts out very, very, very different. When it came, I'm an only child born on Christmas. People say that explains the Messiah complex. And I was, it was just a foregone conclusion from my parents that I would go to Catholic school, which was, in the late 50s, that was sort of the normal thing that happened. Except that our situation wasn't normal in this sense that, number one, my parents had never gone to Catholic school. Number two, they weren't married in the church.
Hey,
And number
can you
three,
respond to
they were
Ellie Unke?
they had probably not been to Mass since their first Holy Communion or confirmation. At any rate, when it came time to register for school, my mother brought me, and Sister Matthew Joseph had her little checklist. And in those days, the parents had to bring 4 documents. One was the child's birth certificate, his baptismal certificate, inoculation certificate, and the parent's marriage certificate. And Sister was dutifully checking them all off. And she said, "Oh, and now, Mrs. Stravinskas, your marriage certificate." And my mother, who was very feisty, said, "I didn't bother bringing it. You wouldn't accept it anyway." And Sister just smiled and said, "Well, we'll have to work on that, won't we?" And that's all that was said about it at the time. Came the first day of school. As an only child, of course, I was delighted with the prospect of going to school, be with other kids. And I came home from school. My mother said, "How did school go?" I said, "Fine." She said, "How was Sister?" "Very good." "How were the other kids?" "Great." "Did you learn anything today?" I said, "Yeah, I learned what I want to be when I grow up." She said, "What's that?" I said, "I want to be a Monsignor." She said, "What's that all about?" And I said, "Well, Monsignor Gormley came and welcomed us to the school, and I think that's the sharpest outfit I've ever seen in my life." As you can see, the buttons are still black. And then fast forward to 2nd grade, preparation for First Confession and First Holy Communion. In between kindergarten and 2nd grade, my mother had gotten roped in by the nuns to be a volunteer, a full-time volunteer. we had almost 2,000 kids in the school, 5 sections of every grade. And so my mother was the sort of attendance officer. She went around from classroom to classroom, which essentially took a whole morning collecting the attendance slips. At any rate, it still hadn't changed her behavior pattern with practice of the faith. And I came home one day and I said, Mommy, I love you. She said, I love you too. I said, well, when I die, I want to go to heaven. Oh yeah, we're all going to heaven. My mother was a Universalist before it was fashionable. And I said, no. I said, but Sister said, and that stopped every argument in any Catholic home. I said, Sister said that people who don't go to Mass on Sunday go to hell when they die. She said, go have your milk and cookies. And so my father came home a couple of hours later, and she said, we've got a problem with the kid. I never knew my name at home. And so he said, what's the problem? She said, at school, that nun. And my father said, he has a problem? He was always the nun's pet. And she said, and I stood there, and she said, go to your room. And if you know anything about the culture of an only child home, you're there for everything. So when you're not there, it means there's something really, really serious. So I went to my room, I got my ear to the door, and my mother says, that wacky nun is causing us trouble. And my father said, what's the trouble? And she told the kid that we're going to go to hell because we don't go to Mass on Sunday. Now, I didn't say that Sister said that, and the Sister didn't say Mr. and Mrs. Stravinskas are going to hell, but my mother made the appropriate application. And so he said, well, what did you expect her to say? And she said, well, I can tell you when I go in tomorrow to school, I'm going to tell her to keep her nose out of our house. And he said, well, you can do that. I'm not sure how much good that's going to do. And she said, well, what do you mean? And he said, I think there's a simpler solution. And she said, what's that? And he said, I think it'd be easier for you and me to start going to Mass than it would be to convince Sister Rita Gertrude that we're not going to hell. And the rest is history. Now, I tell those stories for a number of reasons, because, first of all, I believe in the Catholic school being part of reverse evangelization. In an ideal world, obviously, its parents communicate the faith to their children, and that faith is reinforced in the school. But those of us who have been in the school business for even the past 10 years know that that's a bygone era for the most part. And so, in point of fact, by having children in our schools, we're able to reach that generation, their parents, and not infrequently even their grandparents. Bishop Arthur Kennedy, is Bishop Kennedy online yet? No?
I don't think so, Father.
He has he's the retired auxiliary of Boston and a great academic in his own right. But Bishop Kennedy has maintained that Catholic schools are the vanguard of the new evangelization. We are able to do something that no one else is really able to do. Parents have enough confidence in us that they give their children to us, and we in turn can do an awful lot, both for the family life and for the spiritual life of the children and eventually the parents themselves. Secondly, the rationale for this seminar. Every study for the past 25 years has shown clearly that a Catholic school rises or falls on the involvement of a priest. Priests who are not in favor of the school can kill it in a semester. Priests who are supportive can do tremendous things. Father Breton, Father Peschel are prime examples of what they were able to do in their parishes as a result of getting the necessary information and formation to do the job. And the third point I want to make is, unfortunately, most seminaries give absolutely no guidance to seminarians about the school apostolate. And that's a tragedy of the first order. There was a study of seminarians from about 3 years ago, nationwide study, asking them their attitude toward Catholic schools. And unlike an older generation of priests, seminarians indicate they're very, very supportive of the schools. However, they're very nervous as well because they say, we have been given no training to be involved. And so this project that we've been embarking on for the past 6 years is an effort to plug that hole, as it were. Brother Owen will be able to tell you that, what was it, 2 years ago, brother, I spoke at the college seminary in New York and explained the school apostolate to the students, and at least twice with Monsignor Batul's theologians at the theological seminary in New York. And again, the attitude of the seminarians is extremely positive, but in the college seminary program, it actually morphed into something that no one had quite expected, namely a group of seminarians who were assigned, their apostolic assignment for the year was at one of the Catholic high schools in the Diocese of Rockville Center. And those gentlemen are going to be with us later this evening to talk about that, and Brother Owen shepherded that process through. So, with that said, I think I want then to hand over the baton to our parents. We say that parents are the primary educators of their children. They are. They should be. And the success of the Catholic Education Project is a result of the cooperation between home and school. And so we have Vera and Rick Huff, who are parents of Catholic school children. They themselves are both converts, and their eldest son boasts about the fact that he was a Catholic before his mother. So, Vera, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Actually, two of them were Catholic before me, both Raleigh and Sarah. I'm very happy to be here. I missed the past few conferences, even though here is my basement. And I was looking over my remarks from the last time I was able to speak. And as I looked over them, it suddenly occurred to me that Rick and I have reached the end of our days as active participants in Catholic school education. They began 20 years ago this fall, when our oldest son, Ralston, entered the 5-year-old pre-K in our parish school. And they ended on Sunday afternoon when our younger daughter, Maggie, was graduated from Trinity Hall High School in Tinton Falls. All three of our older children attended not only our parish school, but also went on to 3 different Catholic high schools. In addition to Trinity Hall, our daughter Sarah went to our parish diocesan high school, and Ralston went to a Christian Brothers Academy. So we had an all boys and all girls and a co-ed. So Rick and I are standing at a unique point, looking back over 2 decades of Catholic school education and our experience of it. So I think going into this, there are 2 important things to know about us. One is that we both come from families that greatly value education. Rick's grandmother had 2 master's degrees, which I think must be unusual in a woman who was born in 1915. And my parents were both first-generation college students, which is a big deal these days. My mom says that no one gave her any medals when she was the first person in her family to go to college, but that was thanks to considerable effort, sacrifice, and encouragement on the part of their parents. The other important point is that those families were Protestant. We're both converts, even though Rick beat me to it, and Raleigh and Sarah. So I don't know what the educational climate is among young converts today, but 25 years ago, it was all about homeschooling. And the consensus was that the safest and most effective way to educate our children would be at home, classically, with daily recourse to the sacraments. About 20 years ago, I stumbled on an evangelical homeschoolers picnic in the playground near my parents' house. And I met a mother who helpfully provided the words I had been groping for when I described my feelings about homeschooling. You don't feel called to it. I'm an avid reader and learner, but I'm a terrible teacher. And yet my reluctance to homeschool went beyond that personal lack of vocation. I think that school is, or should and can be, the best preparation for life as a human being. In most adult lives, whatever our pursuits, we must cooperate with our peers, and we must submit to authorities. Our family, founded on love and faith, is also devoted to a goal of mutually respectful behavior, to charity. But we are all fallen, and charity takes practice. In school, a child encounters not only children, but also teachers with whom they do not naturally get along. It's an important thing to learn how to navigate. At the same time, I'm a doting mother, and I happen to have a high opinion of my children. My line is, I consider them a light, and I have no intention of hiding them under a bushel. I put them in the world, and then I remind them at home that they are not of the world. So once we were decided on school, we were also decided on Catholic school. I used to joke that the two best things about Catholic school are no CCD and the day after Halloween off. But it's true. Our ideal education incorporates faith rather than supplementing with it. And our work life, which for children is school, should, like our domestic lives, proceed in concert with the church calendar, which so beautifully reflects salvation history and God's creation. In Catholic schools, our children encounter daily prayer, biblical, catechetical, and theological instruction, mass attendance, though rare, and religious symbols. They also benefited from the discipline of uniforms, some old-fashioned tradition babies that were thrown out with the bathwater in most government schools, like penmanship. And in general, there was an atmosphere that my father, though not Catholic, delightedly described as just like the 50s. So there's no question that we dodged a lot of cultural and academic bullets that are ricocheting around government schools. But I don't think it will shock you to hear that Catholic schools are not perfect. Without telling tales or betraying private woes, I can generally share that we have at various times been disappointed in the academic, social, emotional, and spiritual aspects of the schools our children attended. And although our days in the trenches of Catholic education are over, our two oldest children, now adults, converse with us on a new level and reveal or reflect on their experience in a way that sheds new and not always flattering light on their schools. I strongly feel that in many of these cases, the problems, including but not limited to materialism, nihilism, scrupulosity, clericalism, and heresy, would have been solved or mitigated by the more robust presence of priests and religious in the daily life of the institution. As teachers and advisors, they could have instructed directly by sharing their knowledge and indirectly by sharing their humanity. My grandmother used to say, it takes all kinds of people to make a world, and it takes all kinds of priests to make a church. If we don't know them in all their qualities, we are in danger of demonizing or idealizing them in equal measure. And either of these tendencies threatens to distance us from the church, and then from the faith, and then from our own purpose in life. One of my daughter's greatest disappointments was the unfulfilled promise of her senior year in theology. Their guiding principle, it was announced, would be discernment. Their teacher had spent time in the novitiate, or possibly as a postulant, but ultimately decided she was not called to the religious life. My daughter thought this would be a particularly fruitful opening to approach the discussion of vocation, but that discussion never came. Discernment was not addressed, and the girls had another year of what my daughter describes as woo-woo Christianity. The spiritual navel-gazing that has taken up so much of their religious studies since they memorized their prayers and the sacraments in grade school. In a side note, that description, which sprang readily to her lips on Sunday evening when I was fact-checking this talk with her, allows me to hope that our home supplementation to her religious education has been fruitful. In order to fully educate our Catholic children, we must acquaint them not only with their peers and teachers, but with their pastors. We must acquaint them not only with the teachings of their church, but also the full array of how adult men and women live and fulfill those teachings. Priests must be more present in their lives at school, not only at the altar on holy days of obligation, but in the classroom, the lunchroom, the guidance office, and on the playing field. Then perhaps students will choose the better part, and it will not be taken from them.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Vera. Rick, we've heard from the better half. Now, let's
No
see.
kidding. I'm surprised you even invite me anymore. Whenever Vera does this, you know, it's it feels completely inadequate that I have to speak. So it's interesting, we didn't compare notes before we spoke. And I've done this like Vera in addressing this group several times over the past several years. And I always have a slightly different perspective, obviously influenced by what's happening in the world around us or the current development of my children. And I too reflected quite a bit as a result of the fact that we've had our now grown children at home, although I am much less equipped to use personal direct anecdote as Vera did. But I did interestingly want to start with homeschooling and our choice to send our children to Catholic school and reflect on the priest as a representation of the institutional church, very specifically, which I think aligns very, very well with Vera's reflection. One reason I was drawn to sending my children to Catholic school, despite perhaps a stronger desire on my behalf to homeschool, but of course that choice would have fallen on Vera, not me. And so it could have been quite a selfish decision. But the main motivation for many homeschooling families, and I think myself at the time, going back 26 years ago as a new convert, was really oriented towards passing on the faith that I had chosen and grown to love, and that had meant a tremendous amount to me as a newly formed adult, husband, and soon to be father at that time. And I took that duty very seriously. And in many respects, I think I felt like a lot of homeschoolers, that if only I controlled it, I can control the outcome as well. But what I came to realize, and of course I was friends with Father Stravinskas, who gave wise counsel at the time, was that bypassing the institutional church and the role of teachers, religious, and priests who represent that institutional church had a stronger chance of introducing my children for love of the institution and what the institution represents in our faith if they encountered it on a daily basis as a dispenser of wisdom, as a teacher in their lives, and not merely one that comes from mommy and daddy or the latest thoughts that they had with their friends. And that led me to the reflection today about the nature of institutions in our lives and the institutional church in our lives versus teacher, but also as a carrier of culture. When institutions of authority or precedents in society are squeezed to the margins, are being questioned and dismissed, when the faith itself along with that are being squeezed only to Sunday observance, perhaps at best in many situations, and when the faith or the institutional church is not encountered in daily lives, especially in the lives of young people who are now not just living in a physical world, encountering people, whether that's in their jobs or in their schools or on the playground, but in a virtual world over which, unfortunately, parents have a very, very difficult time controlling, which means that there is an overwhelming river of contrary views, ideas, and cultural influences that are teaching our children quite outside of any government or Catholic institution, or homeschoolers certainly are not immune from this. And the priest in a school is creating a familiarity, a trust as the first and foremost a catechetical individual representing the sacramental life of the church, making it possible, but a physical representation of the institutional nature of the church and the authority of the church. And Vera kind of got at this, and when Catholic schools can go awry, is often when the institution itself starts losing its moorings from how to deal charitably with issues of justice or standards. And very often, a priest, in my experience, who has a presence on campus has a way of elevating that discourse and the approach with which everyone is encountering the school. It's no longer merely school authority or administrative authority or teacher authority. There's a greater representation of the faith behind authority, combined, done well, with a mercy and justice that's incredibly important to the development of young people. And that extension of the catechetical role reminded me of Newman, and I'm glad Father referenced him earlier, in the idea of a university, which was probably one of the most influential books on my own conversion, where he makes the point that without the institutional presence of the church in the life of the Catholic university, and the same would be true of Catholic schools, the entire project is bound to lose its moorings and is bound to lose its way and to cease becoming Catholic. And that absence will result in the loss of not just the practice of the faith within the school and its extension, but I would argue that it results in a subpar education overall. And as is
We just lost Rick.
I think you're right, Father. I'm not sure where he went.
I'll go investigate.
Vera probably pulled the plug on him. While Vera's trying to find her husband, I should make an interesting point. When they live in a very upscale suburban community of New Jersey, and when it came time for the education of their children, neighbors were stunned and asked, well, why would you send them to Catholic school? Our public schools are wonderful. They have everything. And Vera said, do they have Christ? That ended the conversation very quickly. Huh?
I'm back.
Okay.
I am sorry. We have a special needs child, and he is right below me, and he started making noise and a loud noise, and I got jarred, and I hit my keyboard, and it shut it off. So Vera is dealing with it. I'm sorry about that. But at a time when our institutions are being questioned with outright nihilism and attacked, and attempted to be replaced, and indeed institutions, whether those are government schools or secular private schools, have quite frankly replaced any sense of faith in our culture. The value of the institutional church and education and its and the presence of a priest have never been more important in my thinking. And any church that is not any school that is not reinforcing that role on behalf of extending the faith will cease to be Catholic ultimately, and in failing at its jobs. As the CEO of a company, I have the opportunity to interview many young people looking for a job, and one of the biggest crises I see is the lack of a true liberal arts education, which you of course can have if you're a scientist or economist. Indeed, it would make you a better one. But they know little of themselves. what motivates them or why, what it is they want from life, what it could mean to them, what it is about, and what would motivate them towards a higher purpose, not only on behalf of perhaps their family themselves, but on behalf of society. And while this seemed like a bit off topic, one of the biggest issues I see with these young people is that with men that I'm interviewing. They are particularly lost, even in comparison to the young women that I interview. And I have a much easier time hiring and finding young women that would be prepared for the roles. They are naturally a bit more mature at that age still, but nonetheless, I believe that young men are in particular crisis of their own, quite aside from the crisis that we see in youth in our society. And it's just a fact of education today, whether you're looking at a Catholic institution or a secular one, that there are very, very, very few male role models or teachers involved in the upraising of these youth. And certainly it could be fulfilled through religious orders like the Christian Brothers, where my son went to school and had plenty of male role models, whether they were religious or not. But I have to think that the presence of priests on campus, engaged in everyday life of the community, regardless of whether or not they are in the classroom, has a profound effect on the entire anthropology of the exercise in not neglecting 50% of the human race and their particular characteristics of children of God. Not to mention, of course, that young ladies themselves also benefit from exposure from different types of people in the classroom and on campus and in roles of authority. And while I think much of the emphasis in Catholic education may be on the spiritual aspect that a priest brings to a campus, I think that this anthropological aspect is also extremely important, and one that is becoming more apparent, at least to me, looking from the outside as a professional who hires people. And I am absolutely convinced that the presence of priests, brothers, and religious that my son had on campus had a profound effect, an ineffable one, with regards to his attitude, both to the institutional church, but also to those who were teaching them. The devotion and love that they showed, not unlike those of sisters who lamentably are also declining in numbers, left on him is just irreplaceable. Finally, in sum, I would argue that just the fact that they are in the building makes a difference. It cannot be something that is administered from afar. It's my observation that the school's quality, after watching 20 years, rose and fell with the devotion and presence of priests from the local parish in the school. And it varied quite a bit. There were years where there was almost no presence, and there were years where there was a constant presence. And while I can't give you specific circumstances, I can assure you that it just seemed that the vibe of the place, the charism of the place was better, and that my children were happier when that involvement was there. I don't know if it was a matter of accountability or being in touch what was happening, whether it was another figure that was just slightly removed from the pure administrative and teaching aspects of the school, but it made a difference. It allowed the educational enterprise to be elevated beyond bureaucracy and governance and merely a place of teaching toward one of a higher purpose. And it is not lost on a 10-year-old. And I imagine it's because of just the general nature and culture of the place with regards to how people start to react to each other and to authority and the teaching authority of the church.
Thanks, Rick. And last but not least, Lieutenant Chris York, from whom you'll hear tomorrow, is it, Chris, or Thursday as well? But Chris is also a parent and a convert also, actually. Chris, you want to give us your take on things?
Yeah, so I'm also a proud Seton Hall graduate, so from the College of Education, so go Pirates. So my background comes from my father's raised Catholic, pretty much a fall away from the faith. My mother was Protestant, so I was basically raised nothing. Up until I started dating a girl in my mid-20s, who turned out to be my daughter's mother later on, but she was Catholic, and she had talked about bringing me to church and all that. And it was probably the least thing I wanted to do at the time, but ended up going a few times, and then ended up going into the RCIA program, kicking and screaming, and hated every minute of it, probably because of the way that the program itself was presented, and had basically decided I'll go through this because I was getting married, and I will convert, and then that'll be the last time I ever go. And so I did, went through the whole program, kicking and screaming, finished it, and I said, that's it, I'm done with conversion. Ended up getting married, and about 2 years later, my firstborn, my only born daughter, Madison. In the meantime, in the middle of all of it, I guess I had some kind of inkling from the Holy Spirit that decided to maybe look a little bit more into my faith, and I ended up picking up a book on Newman, which was written by a gentleman by the name of Father Peter Stravinskas, whom I didn't know at the time, and started reading the book, and I can honestly say it was a catalyst for really understanding my conversion to the faith. And since then, I've been extremely active in the Catholic Church. My ex-wife, who's my daughter's mother, went to Catholic school herself, and at the time, she wasn't really that into it. She had gone to a very lukewarm Catholic school. There's really no clergy involvement, and the only thing Catholic on it was the name itself. Did not really have a great experience there, so she did not want our daughter Madison to go. I had kind of talked her into it. I said, you know what, I didn't get the opportunity to go to Catholic school. I said, majority of my friends did go to Catholic school. I said, and I would really like to see our daughter go, and I have no problem paying for it. So we entered her into preschool. Preschool worked out well, and then she went to pre-K and kindergarten, and this year she graduated 8th grade at Holy Cross, and now she's going to Red Bank Catholic High School in the fall. So the whole reason, when I first met Father Peter Stravinskas, he asked me, why did you send your daughter to Catholic school? I said, because I didn't get the opportunity to do it. And I said, I'm an only child. My daughter's an only child. And I wanted to make sure that she got the best and got what I didn't have the opportunity to get. I'll get a little bit more about my own personal resume tomorrow, but on top of being a police lieutenant, I'm a college professor at 2 universities and 1 community college here in New Jersey. None of them are Seton Hall, so I won't mention their names, so there's no conflict. But I've been a college professor almost about 6 years now, and one of the things that I have noticed, and to really build on what Rick Huff had talked about, is there really is a lack of liberal arts education in our public schools, especially, I would say probably the deficiencies I see as a college professor with my students is the ability to write, and the ability to write a persuasive argument paper. For some reason, I've just noticed that my Catholic school students who have gone to university or community college are much better writers and understand that. I have a very hard time convincing my public school students that a persuasive argument paper is not an opinion-based paper. And I found it harder. It wasn't as hard so much in the beginning, but I found it harder now to explain to the students how just because you watch something on YouTube or you feel a certain way or your teacher told you a certain way doesn't make it a persuasive argument paper. And they have a hard time with actually doing research. And I fault a lot of that back to the public high schools, the public grammar schools a lot of these students have come from, because there's a culture that exists in the public schools, and I see it, between being a college professor as well as being a lieutenant that works for an extremely affluent community here in Monmouth County. There's a culture in those schools that nobody is wrong. and your opinion is actually credible in the end. And that is one of the biggest disservices that I've seen our students being enculturated into. I have not seen that so much even with my own daughter in Catholic school, and as far as the students that have come through my my college programs as well. I think that's a problem, and we're getting into a situation now, and again, I see more in our public schools, to where, you know, whatever we believe is right, and whatever revolution we want to start is right. And I think that's doing a huge disservice to our children. So that's really, in the end, wasn't the main reason I sent my daughter to Catholic school, but in the end, I realized that that's something that she wasn't enculturated into, which I find is extremely important. The other thing, too, is the faith component. We live in a world where faith really has no place in secular culture anymore, unfortunately. And now more than ever, we see it, how if you have faith, or if you express your faith, that you're almost considered a pariah. And that is certainly a culture that exists in public schools. Even when I was in public schools, we had to recognize everybody. But now we call public schools, and I see it, you know, again, from the community that I work in, we're not even allowed to mention what holidays are. And we're not allowed to recognize anybody else's holidays, because no religion is right and nobody's wrong. And that was not the environment that I wanted my daughter to be brought up in. You know, the faith component and the structure that comes along with Catholic school is extremely important. There's nothing worse than seeing kids walk to school in the morning in pajamas and then have to go to a job interview. On top of my job, I'm also on the interview board for my police department. And again, I'm a lieutenant. I've been there going into my 25th year now. And I've sat on the interview board for my department for 16 years. And one of the things that I can definitely stress upon is, and the back on where Rick said, males have a hard time really finding themselves. And unfortunately, they're looking at other idols, you know, whether it's, you know, degenerate sports figures or musicians or pop culture, you know, flash in the pan artists that show up as what is the role model, as what a male is. Because a lot of families, and again, whether you're talking about extremely poor, extremely rich, do not have parents who are really involved in their lives. And the structure that comes along with Catholic school really helps build that. And just one story to end off on, because I would say it's probably, you know, an experience that I had in hiring. We hired 2 entry-level dispatchers for our department. One's a CBA graduate, and the other one was a public school graduate. CBA graduate, well-spoken, presented well. And
CBA is Christian Brothers Academy.
Yes, Christian Brothers Academy, Lincroft. The other was public school. Again, presented well, just not as well-spoken. CBA graduate, took 3 days to train them. The public school graduate, it took 10 days to train them. And the fact is, had nothing to do with ability, had to do with confidence. Something that CBA graduate had confidence in, really from having a good, you know, male role models and good structure that came behind it, that allowed him to really adapt to the job, where the other candidate, you know, was 10 days and really in the end lacked the confidence that the other candidate had. Similar age group. Again, just a difference between, you know, the environment you come in. But again, when we live in a world where it's permissible for parents to send their children to school in pajamas and accept that structure, you know, I think that's where we're lacking. And again, I work in an affluent community in Monmouth County, and to see that, I mean, in my opinion, is where a lot of the breakdown comes from. You know, and we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. You know, a lot of the issues occur with school violence, vandalism, and substance abuse. We don't have it to the same level going on inside the schools that we do in the public schools. Now, again, you're going to have issues with substance abuse anywhere, but we've gotten to a level to where you actually have substance abuse going on inside the schools, where we don't see that as much in our Catholic schools. So that's another issue too we can talk about tomorrow. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. You know, again, my daughter had the opportunity to go to Rumsfeld schools, and I chose not to, because I'd rather pay the money to make sure she got the faith formation and the structure that is well needed. And I say it, the structure that I didn't get going to Rumsfeld schools, that I felt that she was able to get going to Catholic schools. So that's why I sent my daughter to Catholic school.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody have any questions for any of the 3 parents? Nothing? Okay, well, as we say at the weddings, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yes, Father Andrew.
Father, if I may, one question. So for any of the parents, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Father Andrew, yeah.
A question is for Vera. I think I found it very, very interesting as you said that how do we incorporate faith rather than supplement faith in the school, in the religious education? How does the religion, the faith education become part of everyday life rather than supplement on Monday evening during the religious education life? How did you as a parent make that connection, and what suggestions would you have for us as the pastors as we try to work with the religious education parents, that their faith and the faith of their children, because that's a big struggle with the religious education that very often it is a supplement, not the part of everyday life. What suggestions you would have for all of us? Thank you.
That's a good question, and I wish I had a better prepared and more educated answer for it. My personal pet domestic apostolate was living the church year with my children. And there are a lot of wonderful books about this, Around the Year with the Von Trapp Family, Mary Reed Newland's books, Elizabeth Burge-Vitz's cookbook, The Continual Feast. And I think they're more up-to-date versions, but I'm always in the 50s. My children still mention the foods that we prepared and the crafts that we did and the stories that we told in connection with holy days and saints' days. They know many, many saints, and they never, they never think it's the Ascension when it's the Assumption or vice versa. They're richly rooted in the church year, and they treasure that cycle as it comes around again. And as you know, when you're familiar with the church year, you're also familiar with salvation history, because you're going from incarnation to resurrection and back to incarnation over and over again. So that's my best suggestion, especially in the elementary years, to just really live that church calendar physically.
Anybody else? Kevin, you started to say something.
Yes, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt Father Andrew, but for any of the parents over here, regarding advocacy with other Catholic parents, what are some of the things that you have said, you have done, in order to convince your friends or just other fellow Catholic parents that a Catholic education is worth it? What are maybe some practical things you'd recommend we should say to, or you can say to fellow parents to really make them enroll their child in the Catholic school? I guess in other words, what I'm looking for is, what is the elevator pitch that a parent would say to another parent?
Well, I'll begin on that one. I mean, the perfect example you can use, to get other people to enroll their children into Catholic schools is your child themselves, how your child presents. You certainly see a huge difference between a child who's attended Catholic school versus, a child who's in a public school environment. The discipline that comes along with that, the child themselves is truly, the advertising piece to encourage parents to go in. I mean, now, we run into issues where, Catholic schools are much more costly than they used to be. So it's harder and harder to get people to make that financial commitment, especially now with people being out of work. But at the same time, the best investment you can ever put your money in is your child. And, your child, how your child has turned out is the best investment you can use, best example of for that investment you can use for another family. The other thing too, you have to make sure that your parish priests are on board with the school. The one thing that I have seen is there's too many parish priests that are not involved in the school, and they see the school now as a separate entity or an albatross that they'd like to get rid of. You have to have the commitment from your pastor, who's really in the end going to promote that school and explain, in their homilies to the church why it's important to support your Catholic school and what the difference is. This verbiage we use now, and I've heard, pastors say it, I've heard bishops say it. When we started, I said, we have great public schools and we have great Catholic schools. Well, that's true, but our Catholic schools are not our public schools. Our Catholic schools are something much more than what our public schools have to offer. And by saying that they're both great on the same level does a disservice to our Catholic schools, because there's something that's offered at Catholic schools and no public school can ever offer, and that's faith. That's formation in the faith. And that structure and that formation of faith that comes along with it is something that our public schools. So saying that they're both great and they both have commitment to supporting both of them is doing our Catholic schools a disservice.
Thank you.
Vera, you have anything to add?
I can't really improve on Chris's answer. It's true that children are the best recommendation for the schools. I would add, when people bring up that economic objection, we've met a lot of very affluent people who say, oh, I wish I could afford to send my kids to Catholic school like you did. I sometimes tell them, there was a boy in Raleigh's class whose father was a janitor. And we also personally know from the work that Rick has done with Children's Scholarship Foundation that there are people in inner cities who are scrimping and saving to raise the $1,000 or even less than that contribution that they're required to put in order to get a CSF scholarship so that their kids can go to Catholic school. So it's it's a matter of your priorities.
It's a neuralgic piece here, right, Father? You would call it a neuralgic piece to Catholic education to establish clear priorities for your family.
Yeah. Some of you have heard this story before, but some years ago, a couple of years ago, we're just finishing the Catholic identity assessment for the high schools of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and I was flying out. It was January, and I was flying out of Newark to LA, and I'm sitting on the plane, and a family came in the row in front of me, and the father of the family sort of nodded his head and greeted me, and we took off, and we got to LA early, actually, and then we're all standing up to get out, and they couldn't get the darn door of the plane open. So it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and eventually people actually start to talk to each other, and so the husband turned to me and he said, "Father, are you from New Jersey or from California?" I said, "New Jersey." "Oh, we are too." And he said, "So what are you doing?" I said, "Is this your final stop?" He said, No, we hope to be able to catch the connecting flight to Hawaii. We're doing a family winter vacation." "Oh," I said, "that's nice." I said, "Where are you from in New Jersey?" And Chris will appreciate this. He said, "We're from Rumson." And I said, "Oh, Holy Cross Parish." And he said, "Yes, you know it." I said, "Yes." I said, "Do your children go to Holy Cross School?" And he said, No. I said, "Oh, where do they go?" He said, "They go to the local public school." And I said, "Well, why would that be?" And he went, I said, "Really?" I said, "I find that fascinating." I said, for 3 reasons. I said, one, I said, Holy Cross has been a blue ribbon school for at least 15 years. The last time I checked, the tuition was, by the way, I should make the point, Holy Cross Rumson is probably the wealthiest parish in the Diocese of Trenton. All right. I said, so number one, it's a blue ribbon school. Number two, the tuition is probably about $5,000 or $6,000 per kid. And I said, and I wasn't a math major in college, but I'm doing some quick math here. And my guess is this vacation is going to cost you about 15 or 20K. And he said, "Well, Father." I said, "I do, and that's the problem." That ended the conversation. He was lucky the door opened for the plane and we walked out. But Rick's point, it's priorities. But my other point is, where are the pastors to challenge the priorities of the parents?
It's a tough role, and that is exactly where it is. I would add one other thing, which is that if to just go on the theme of priestly presence on campus, if the school is not going to explicitly and authentically be Catholic and fully Catholic and assured that way by the pastor and the priests involved with that school, it's not offering something compellingly different enough and differentiated enough in a marketplace to attract someone who would want to pay a bit more for the education? Why is it, what's making it different or important to go there? And vague values or discipline are just not enough.
And I always say that I'm a great believer in niche marketing. And there are two niches for a Catholic school today. One, authentically Catholic, which we're going to talk about this evening. And secondly, a classical approach to education. And if you're doing those two things, you have no competition anywhere else. And those are your two selling points, and people are willing to buy in for that.
Very well put.
Anybody else?
Hi, can I?
Sure, brother. Yeah.
Vera, can I ask? If I'm wrong, but I do think, Vera, you mentioned something before about the robust presence of priests in this, and you mentioned about the danger of either demonizing or idealizing the priest. I thought that was very, very interesting, and I was wondering, would you want to follow up a little bit on that?
Throughout life, and not just in school and not just in the church, there's no substitute for knowing individual people. That's what, to touch on a third rail topic right now, that's what battles racism. Knowing people, knowing actual people. That's what battles any kind of untrue or unhelpful generalization that you make. So if you have mentors who are priests, if you have teachers who are priests, if you have friends who are priests, if your parents have priests over for dinner, you are much less likely to then say, I'm leaving the church. Priests are all monsters. Priests don't understand me. Putting a real face, real faces on people is just the only way to navigate the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry, I lost track of my thoughts. Priests. Oh, I frequently encounter among my non-Catholic friends people who say, oh, well, why do you go to a priest for spiritual counseling? They're not married. They don't know anything about marriage. But if they had ever met a priest and talked to them about their marriage, they would know how helpful spiritual direction from a celibate religious person can be. And that it is entirely possible to understand marriage from that perspective. So that's just an example.
Right. Thank you very much.
One more point, why priests are so important today. With the mass exodus of women religious from the schools in the 60s and the 70s, the only institutional presence of the church in a school today very often is the priest. Now, we have two wonderful sisters as part of our program, one Dominican from Nashville and the other Dominican from Ann Arbor, Michigan, but they're the only two big players anymore in the Catholic educational scene in this country. When the sisters are present, we don't have to be as concerned, visible sisters are present. We don't have to be as concerned about the institutional fidelity and identity. But with that absent, it's critically important, much, much more important for the priest to be involved today than it was 50 years ago, even though ironically, 50 years ago, priests were more involved than they are today. Anything else for our parents? Okay, well, we're going to take a little dinner break. For some of you in the Midwest and the West, you can pretend that it's high tea. And we'll come back and see you at 6 o'clock for a session on the Catholic schools and the Church's magisterium. Thanks so much.
Thank you.